The forest was quieter than it should have been. Night pressed in thick and heavy, the kind that smothered even the smallest sounds. The wind had stopped hours ago, and the cold air smelled of wet pine and ash. In the middle of a narrow clearing, a fire burned, or rather, tried to. Its flames were weak and uneven, flickering like something afraid to be alive. From the shadows just beyond its reach, a lynx watched. Her eyes caught what little light there was, turning gold for an instant before vanishing back into the dark. She stood low to the ground, tail twitching slightly, ears turning toward every sound. The pop of the firewood, the drip of melting frost from a nearby branch, the distant crack of something large moving far beyond. But it wasn't the forest she was watching. It was the fire. The scent around it was wrong, sharp, human, metallic. Scattered near the flames lay scraps of fabric, a dented pot, and footprints already half filled with melting snow. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry, or had been taken by something faster. The lynx moved closer, paws silent on the frozen ground. Steam rose faintly from her breath. She stopped just at the edge of the firelight, her fur glowing silver in the weak orange glow. The flames sputtered, gasped, and threw up a handful of sparks that died almost before they left the ground. The lynx blinked, slow and deliberate, watching as the last of the firewood collapsed inward. The light dimmed. Beyond it, the forest seemed to lean closer, dark trunks crowding around the clearing, shadows thickening as though the trees themselves were waiting for the light to go out. She turned her head toward the deeper woods. Something moved there, quiet but deliberate. The faint crunch of boots, a glint of metal catching moonlight. Humans. She froze, muscles tensing, her breath shallow. The scent hit her next. Smoke, oil, blood. Not fresh, not old, but recent enough to make her ears tilt forward. 3 of them emerged from the darkness. Their steps were cautious, rifles slung across their backs. Their faces were covered in soot. One carried a lantern that threw pale light across the clearing. It reflected off her eyes for a moment, and the man stopped. "Wait," he whispered. The others turned. The fire flared briefly, and in that heartbeat, they saw her, still as stone, watching them through smoke. No one moved. Then the flame cracked again, breaking the spell. One man lifted his rifle, too slow. The lynx leapt backward into the shadows, vanishing between the trees before a finger even touched the trigger. The forest swallowed the sound of their breath. "She was right there," one of them muttered, his voice trembling. Right there." "Forget it," another said, kicking at the dying embers. "We find the traps and get out before the smoke brings more of them." The lynx crouched among the roots of a fallen spruce, invisible now, her heartbeat steadying. She watched as the men gathered their tools, muttering low. The fire sank into ash, the smoke rising in slow spirals that faded into the branches. When they were gone, she crept forward again, padding silently to where the fire had been. The air still held their scent, fear mixed with iron. She sniffed once, then turned her gaze toward the direction they'd come from. There were more fires out there. She could smell them. Too many. The forest, once alive with prey and sound, had grown thin and brittle these past moons. The humans were hunting something bigger now, not for food, but for control, and the lynx could feel it in the earth beneath her paws. The trees no longer trusted the light. She sat by the dead embers and watched the last threads of smoke rise through the still branches. The smell clung to her fur, heavy, wrong. Above her, the moon broke free of the clouds, pale, cold, and distant. And as it touched the clearing with its light, the lynx blinked once, slow and deliberate, her golden eyes reflecting not firelight now, but something colder, the memory of it. The forest held its breath, and the smoke carried away what was left of the light. By dawn, the forest was pale and still, its breath held beneath a blanket of fog. The night's frost clung to every branch, thin and sharp, like glass waiting to break. The lynx moved silently between the trees, her paws barely pressing into the soft layer of snow. She followed the trail the men had left behind, a path of heavy boots, cigarette ash, and fear. It wound through the undergrowth, shallow where they walked in step, deeper where they'd stopped and hesitated. The scent of smoke grew stronger with each step. They hadn't gone far. The forest around her was changing now. Younger trees with scorched bark, ground littered with blackened twigs. The air here tasted wrong. It wasn't just human scent. It was something older, something that didn't belong in living woods. The lynx stopped beside a fallen pine. Beneath its trunk, half buried in frost, was a shape, a trap, steel jaws, rusted but still set, its teeth glinting faintly in the gray light. The snow around it was disturbed, blood dark in one patch, already frozen. The lynx lowered her head, sniffed. The scent was faint, but she recognized it. Fox. Young. Dead. She stepped back. The men were hunting everything that moved, but not for food. No scent of meat on the air, no carcasses taken. Just the smell of metal, fire, and oil. She climbed a small rise and crouched low, her breath fogging faintly in the cold. From here, she could see farther. A clearing ahead, wider than the rest, with a thin curl of smoke rising from its center. The men were there again, 3 of them. One sat near a new fire, its flames weak and uneven, his rifle across his knees. Another was bent over a crate, sorting through tools and wires. The third, the oldest, stood apart, facing the tree line. He didn't move. The lynx narrowed her eyes. Something about him was wrong. He wasn't watching the forest. He was listening. She moved closer, step by careful step, until she could hear the faint sound of their voices beneath the wind. Tracks ended here, one said, the younger one. Big ones. Clawed. But not bare. Could be lynx, another answered. The old man shook his head slowly. No. Not this deep. Not alone. He turned slightly. For a moment his face caught the light. Lined, weary, his eyes hollow from too many nights awake. Then what was it? The young one asked. The old man's gaze swept the forest edge, past her hiding place. Something that doesn't want to be found. The words hung there, thin and uncertain. The lynx crouched lower, tail still. She could hear their hearts, could smell the unease in their sweat. The forest was pressing on them. Not through danger, but through silence. Then suddenly a sound broke it. A sound broke, a faint creak, like metal shifting under weight. One of the traps nearby had been triggered. The men turned instantly, rifles raised. There! The lynx darted sideways into the trees, her body a blur of pale fur and shadow. The shot came a heartbeat too late, echoing through the valley like thunder. Birds exploded from the treetops, cawing wildly before vanishing into mist. She ran until the smoke disappeared behind her, until even the sound of the fire faded. Her lungs burned, but she didn't stop until she reached the edge of a frozen stream. There, she paused, panting softly. Her reflection wavered in the thin ice. Golden eyes, wet whiskers, and behind her, the faint gray trail of smoke rising above the trees. She looked down at her paws. Blood, not hers, but fresh, streaked across one pad. From the trap? From another creature caught before her? She couldn't tell. The forest around her was beginning to wake now, the fog lifting in thin ribbons. In the distance, a crow called. Low, hoarse, almost human in tone. The lynx turned her head, listening. Then she began to follow the stream, not toward the rising sun, but backward, against the current. The hunters thought they were chasing her, but they were walking in circles. And if they kept moving deeper, the forest would stop hiding. It would start watching back. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the forest was no longer still. The wind had returned, not in gusts, but in long, uneven sighs, threading through the branches like something trying to remember how to breathe. The lynx moved along the frozen stream, her reflection flashing briefly between sheets of ice. The scent of the men was fading now, replaced by the raw smell of burnt earth and rot. She followed it deeper, past places where the snow had melted in strange circular patches, and the trees leaned inward as though listening to the ground. Then she saw it. At first it looked like just another blackened trunk, but as she drew closer, she realized it was different. Older. Larger. The bark was cracked and gray, the wood beneath scorched deep into its heart. The ground around it was bare, no moss, no snow, only soil baked into dark glass. The lynx stopped a few paces away. The air here was heavy, thick enough to taste. It smelled of ash, but also something else. iron, and the faintest trace of oil. She crouched low and sniffed near the roots. They were massive, curling in spirals beneath the soil, like the ribs of something long dead. One root was split open, and inside, half buried in mud, she saw a shape, a thin cylinder of metal, smooth and strange, like no stone or tool she'd ever seen before. It hummed, so faintly she almost thought it was her heartbeat. The lynx stepped back, her ears flattened. The hum grew louder for a moment, not a sound, but a vibration, rising through the ground, into her paws, into her chest. It stopped suddenly, leaving the forest unnaturally silent. A crow cried somewhere far above, breaking the spell. The lynx blinked, then looked to her left. Movement. Someone was there. A human shape, stepping between the blackened trunks. One of the hunters? The old man. His rifle hung loose at his side, his breath visible in the cold air. His face looked different in daylight, not fierce, but hollow. He approached the tree slowly, not noticing her hidden in the brush. His boots crunched against the hard soil. When he reached the roots, he stopped and stared down at the exposed metal. "It's still here," he muttered. His voice was low, cracked with disbelief. "After all these years." He knelt, gloved hand brushing the dirt from the cylinder. The metal caught the sunlight and shone weakly. The lynx tilted her head, silent. She could see his hands trembling. Then he looked around, toward the forest, toward the shadows, toward her without seeing her, and whispered, "We shouldn't have lit the first fire." He stood, staring up into the branches of the dead tree. "We thought it was just roots, just wood and stone. But it goes deeper. It remembers." The wind rose again, hissing through the burned limbs. The man turned sharply as if expecting a voice to answer. None came. He lifted the rifle, not to aim, but to hold it close, like something to hide behind. "We tried to bury it," he said softly, "but the ground won't keep it. It keeps giving it back." The lynx's tail twitched. She could feel it now, not sound but pulse, moving under the soil. The hum was returning, stronger this time, steady as breath. The ground trembled faintly. The man backed away from the roots. His face had gone pale. "No," he whispered. "Not again." He turned and ran. The lynx stayed where she was, watching as he disappeared into the trees, his boots leaving deep prints in the frost. When he was gone, she stepped forward, close to the roots. The hum was fading again, sinking lower, quieter, like something sleeping beneath the forest floor. She touched her paw lightly to the soil. Warm. The forest was cold everywhere else, but not here. She looked up. Above her, the burned branches stretched toward the sky, black and twisted, cutting through the pale light like bones through skin. The wind carried the scent of smoke again, fresh this time. Far behind her, the men were lighting another fire. The lynx turned, ears twitching, eyes narrowing. The forest around her shifted, whispering in the small voices of leaves and ash. It was no longer hiding. Something had awakened. And as the first column of smoke rose again in the distance, the forest began to close its eyes, not in peace, but in preparation. The first smoke rose slow, thin, harmless, or so it looked from where the lynx stood. But the forest could smell it. Before the wind carried it far, the trees had already begun to shiver. The air grew thicker, warmer, the stillness alive again with unease. The lynx moved through the undergrowth, her paws silent but urgent. She knew the scent now, not just fire, but oil and gunpowder. The same men, the same mistake. They were trying again. She climbed a low ridge that overlooked the valley below. The fire was small at first, a circle of orange where the hunters worked, their silhouettes sharp against the glow. They were burning brush, feeding the flames to clear ground. The youngest one laughed once, the sound dry, too loud for the forest. Then, the wind turned. The smoke blew back over them, black and heavy. And for the first time that day, the sun disappeared behind it. The lynx watched as their shapes blurred. The laughter stopped. The old man shouted something, waving his arms toward the others. His voice carried faintly through the trees, torn by wind. "Put it out! Now!" But the forest had already taken the fire. Flames leapt from one trunk to another, climbing the pines like they'd been waiting years for the chance. The dry needles caught in seconds, the air filled with a deep, low roar. Not sound, but movement, a storm of heat. The lynx turned and ran. She darted between roots and rocks, through thickets now glowing from below. Ash rained like snow. Every breath burned. The sound of the men faded behind her, swallowed by the roar. When she reached the frozen stream again, it was no longer frozen. Steam rose from its surface where embers had landed, the water hissing, darkening. She leapt across it and climbed the opposite bank, claws biting into damp earth. From the ridge above, she looked back. The valley was burning. The old tree, the one with the metal roots, stood at its center, flames wrapping around it in spirals. The ground glowed red beneath it like veins lit from below. The fire wasn't spreading outward anymore, it was sinking down. The lynx crouched low, eyes wide, ears pressed flat. The hum she'd heard before had returned, stronger, deeper. It came from under the forest now, vibrating through the soil. The fire around the tree changed color, from orange to white, then blue. It didn't flicker. It pulsed. The smoke rose in thick columns, forming shapes that twisted before dissolving into the clouds. The men's voices were gone. The rifles, the shouts, even the sound of panic. All of it smothered by that humming core. And then, for a moment, it stopped. Silence. The fire vanished. Not burned out, gone, as if swallowed. The smoke froze in the air, hanging above the blackened clearing like mist caught mid-breath. The lynx stared, unmoving. Slowly, the air shifted. The smoke began to drift backward, not upward, curling into the trees, wrapping around trunks, seeping into hollows and roots. The forest was taking it back, pulling the burn inward. The hum faded, replaced by the crackle of cooling wood and the slow creak of trees settling. When the lynx finally descended, the ground was black and warm under her paws. The old tree still stood, charred but unfallen. Beneath it, the earth had split open. From the crack, faint gray steam rose, carrying the metallic scent of old air, the kind buried too long. She approached cautiously. Peering into the opening, she saw nothing but dark. But she felt something. A draft, slow and steady, like breath. The forest exhaled. Behind her, the crows had returned, circling low, calling in rough voices. The lynx turned her head toward the sound. The birds weren't calling in fear. They were warning. She stepped back from the crack. The ground around it trembled once, faint, like something shifting in sleep. The forest would recover. The smoke would fade. The men would not. And the thing beneath, whatever the fire had fed, would wait. The lynx turned away and walked into the fog. Her fur still smelled of ash, her breath short from the heat. Above her, the branches groaned softly as if whispering to one another. They had seen too much fire, and for the first time in a long while the forest seemed to understand what fear felt like